You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. It's great to have you back here today on this Training Thursday edition of the show, where we are going to be building off the last week's topic of the 7 signs you've become too catabolic. And on that show, I went over what it looks like from the inside out of the body as you begin to age at a more rapid pace. Now, with understand is that we control our body's response to aging. We really do. We all age, there's no doubt about that, but you can age faster or slower based on the de-stress protocol and based on your ability to regulate diet, exercise, stress, toxins, your body's ability to get in that parasympathetic nervous system that we just call rest. Your emotions, believe it or not, they really do make a huge difference. Then we look at the supplements you're using to combat aging, as well as that success mindset. So that's what we use to combat the 7 signs you become too catabolic. Now, in a couple weeks, I will go over exact steps to take, because there are actually steps to take with your nutrition and exercise and stress, all those things. And I'll go over that. There's no doubt about it. But today I want to build off of that, because one of the things that I see going on right now in our world is an overemphasis on how hard we are training, on how hard we are going, right? So, it's going to be focused today on exercise, but it should be focused on how hard you're living your life. That's really it. So maybe you're not going full tilt in terms of your exercise, or maybe it has more to do with how hard you're living your days, right? Are you running from activity to activity? And that matters. But I'm going to stay focused today on predominantly on exercise, because it's my belief that we all need to exercise. But also, the harder you exercise, and it doesn't mean you can't exercise hard, but it does mean that your recovery has to be even harder. And that is oftentimes what we forget, because we try to do in the later 30s and beyond what we once did as a teenager or in our 20s that no longer works, because we simply don't have the same buffering system that we once had. We don't recover as quickly. Our protein synthesis isn't as strong. So our body's ability to build back up, which is really what we're talking about, is not as strong or adept as it once was. So really, just as a recap, the difference between anabolism and catabolism is catabolism, the body's breaking down too quickly. It's oxidizing too fast. It's aging too fast. And I'm going to go over that here today. Versus the body building back up. Rejuvenation, right? It's the body's ability to rebuild the skin, the hair, the nails, the muscles. And we look at the muscles as muscle tone. Well, as you begin to age, those muscles actually look a little bit more flaccid or flabby or soft. And we need to be able to keep the body in a nice anabolic zone. Now, that can be taken too far, right? It can be taken too far with steroids, or it can be taken too far with too much weight gain, which can actually cause then too much of an anabolic effect, believe it or not. That could be then leaving you more prone to cancer or inflammation or other issues relating to that. But most people aren't really moving too much in that direction. As they age, they're actually more of that catabolic state, more of that vata-based state. And you can look at my previous Ayurvedic podcast on the different stages of life to learn more about that, how we move from kapha stage to pitta stage to vata-based stage. All right, so let's go over those signs right now. I want to take you through essentially 11 main signs. I'll give you a couple extras, but these are really important because for the most part, you're not going to go to your typical doctor or a personal trainer or practitioner and be like, oh, you're in a more catabolic state. They're just not going to say that to you. Now, they might find the individual signs, but I really want everybody to be their own doctor, to be their own practitioner. That's why I do the daily Cabral concept. My goal is over thousands of podcasts to share with you everything that I've learned at a practical level, at a real world level that you can use in your real life. Because it's one thing to be able to kind of think about certain concepts, but it's a total nother to be able to put it into real world practice. And that's what I want you to do. So if you start to see these signs on a friend, a family member, a coworker, a loved one, I want you to say it to them in a nice, gentle way. And I also want you to look at it for yourself as well. Really, really important, okay? So let's take a look at this. Symptom number 1, I'm going to stick with more of that exercise, okay? So this is building off of last week. I want you to go back and check out episode 1279. All right, so stephencabral.com/1279. Right after today's show, check that out. But the number one, or the first one, these aren't in any particular order for sure. But the first one is this. If you've been going to the gym for a while now, and you're basically maxed out, you're maxed out on how far you can run or cycle or how much weight you can lift or how many sets you can do, you have basically met your upper limit for now. Now, here's the interesting thing. We typically don't push past an upper limit if you're already doing 3 to 5 days a week by doing more exercise. If you're doing 4 to 5 days, for sure, the answer is not typically more. The answer is more nutrition, more sleep, more recovery, or maybe even a little bit less strenuous workouts for a week or two. We call that an unloading week, in order to better be able to recover and then push past those plateaus. So I want you to think about that. If you've kind of hit a plateau in the gym, look at that as a sign. Are you overtraining? Are you becoming a little bit too catabolic in the gym right now? Is your exercise program essentially maxed out? Okay. The answer is, yeah, you could continue to push and push and push, but is that going to bring you more benefits? More times than not, it is a no. I work with certain athletes, and I've worked with world champions. I've worked with Olympians. And one thing I can tell you for sure is that almost always they're overtraining. So I know that if they're part of a team, they kind of have to do this. I can give the head coach, and I am on the call with the head coach, and I say, listen, they're not going to lose all their progress if they take 1 week off to recover. Let's see if we can get that body recovered during that week. They're not just going to sit around and do nothing, but they're going to be doing massage, they're going to be doing float tank, they're going to be doing some sauna, they're going to be doing some meditation and everything that we can do to work on more recovery. And I'll talk more about that in the future. And so we know that they're doing active-based recovery work, and 9 times out of 10, that does a tremendous amount for when they come back. All right, so let's move on to number 2. This touches on one of the topics I spoke about last week, but that was if you start to see your skin becoming a little bit more thin, even a little bit drier, and that goes for the hair, skin, and nails as well, but the skin shows it. And also the face begins to become more drawn. The eyes actually start to look a little bit more inset inside of the face itself. And the cheeks can become a little bit more drawn as well, meaning like a little bit more sunken in. These are signs that the body is over-dieting or over-exercising or becoming more catabolic. Keep an eye on that, because there's a lot of people I see right now that are doing keto, and I'm doing that in air quotes, or they're overdoing fasting, that are just aging their body at such a faster rate. I know there's a bunch of YouTubers out there that are very smart. There's no doubt about it. They're knowledgeable, but they're taking this too far. And I look at them and I say, wow, like you looked so much better 2 years ago. Now, 2 years never makes a huge difference. I know people that are 36 and now they're 37 years old. This shouldn't be a huge difference. And I can tell on these guys and these girls that they are just overdoing it, that they're dieting for too long, that they're constantly in this state of catabolism. And I can tell, I can look at their face and I say, you no longer have that youthful, plump vibrancy to your face that you did before. And that's a tough one, right? Because that's always not going to come back right away unless they begin to work more on rejuvenation rather than on this catabolism. Okay, the third one is this. Are you not even interested in exercising? That's a big one. If you're not just saying, I'd love to get out there and move my body. If you don't want to move your body, you're most likely a little too run down, a little bit too catabolic, a little bit too filled with stress hormones, and you're just thinking, hey, I can't do anything else. If I do anything else, I'll just be more tired, more run down. I don't have any time in the first place. If that's you, you're most likely more towards the catabolic state. Like you're just lacking that motivation to get out there and move that body, not even for weight loss. I mean, what I do exercise-wise now is not for weight loss. I've met my body transformation goals. Sure, during the summertime, I'll lose another 5 pounds to 6 pounds, be a little bit leaner, just for me, for nobody else, just for me. But I try to stay within that. I've did a podcast on that 5-pound buffer I talk about for most people. But, here's the thing. I still exercise because it's about health. You'll hear tomorrow on our Friday review about this specific piece of research that I want to bring you. Really, really important, okay? But if you're not motivated to move that body, let's take a look at that. It might be becoming a little bit too catabolic. Another one is this. I know I'm always overtraining or I'm pushing it a little bit too much if I start to get a lot of stiffness, if I start to get some joint pain, if I start to get a little bit more, my muscles are just sore for more than a day or so after a new workout, right? Or they're sore for multiple days. That's the delayed onset muscle soreness that might not even happen for 48 hours after a workout. Now, that can happen when you begin a new workout, but if it's happening in week 3 and 4 of your program, you're most likely not building back up and recovering as quickly as you should. You should take a look at that because in the long term, you're breaking that body down to too high a degree. Another thing that you'll find is this. If you increase thirst, if your thirst is continuing to increase, you can't get enough water. This can be of too much protein breakdown. This doesn't mean the protein that you're eating in your body. This means your actual muscle tissue. And that's because your body needs water and lots of water to move that protein through the kidneys, which is not good for your kidneys either. So now you can lab test this with your PCP, but you're probably not going to have access to this. But if your thirst is increasing, it's very important that you're looking at blood sugar that I'll talk about in a minute, but also that you are not losing too much muscle mass. And you can do that by doing a body composition analysis. And I've done a show on that before too. And if you're working with a personal trainer, they can do that for you to make sure, even if you're losing weight, that you're not losing too much muscle, because increased thirst is not a good thing. I mean, sure, everybody needs to drink their water. There's no doubt about it. But if you are thirsty and you're constantly thirsty, there is something going on, and this is serious. And I want you to look at that, because if you're breaking down a lot of muscle, not only is that going to hurt your metabolism in the long run, it's not great for your kidneys. It's not great for any detox process of the body. Be careful with that. Really, really important to look at that, okay? Your muscles should not be sore every day of your life as well. So here's the thing. I know that if I'm traveling a lot, if I'm working a lot, I can't also then be training really, really hard too, because I'll start to be more sore because I'm lacking maybe in my sleep and I'm just doing too much travel. There's too much stress and I can't add another great stressor, which would be my workouts. So I'll still work out. I'm not saying not to work out, but what I'm saying is I won't push it as hard, right? I'll do it more to enjoy the motions, to go through the exercises, but I'm not going to be trying to go for personal bests that week. All right, the other one, I want to start to move into a little bit of immunity in the mind. So if you start to get more frequent colds, cough, colds, chest congestion, recurring ear, nose, and throat issues, look at that as a sign that the body is being pushed a little bit too hard, because what happens when you become overly stressed, and it can be from your exercise, what happens is this. It begins to lower your immune system. The first line defense is often the secretory IgA. It's called SIGA on blood work. Sure, your PCP could run this if you want, if you have a really good PCP, but maybe they do, maybe they don't. Think of it as this. The more stressed you are, and that's why we always run this typically with cortisol, is that you begin to lower that secretory IgA level. When that happens, you can't fight off the common bacteria and viruses that enter your body that you would typically be able to knock down so that you didn't feel the cold. Remember, the cough and cold and the ear, nose, and throat issues are not a sign that your body is not working. It's a sign that your body's fighting off a bacteria and a virus, and that it's had to really dig deep down into the immune system. Ideally, you knock down that virus before it really starts to replicate, or that bacteria before it really starts to grow in the body, right? So, that's what I recommend, of course. That is what I recommend, and that's why I recommend boosting your immune system before travel or before a stressful period of time. Don't wait until you get a cold. Don't wait until you get sick. When I travel and I fly across the country to LA, or I fly to Texas, or I fly to Arizona, those are typical places where I might be speaking. or I fly to DC, then I'm already boosting my immune system for 2 days before I get on that flight because I know I'm going to be exposed to a couple hundred sick people that are going to be coughing and sneezing inside of this metal tube that I'm flying on that I'm going to be exposed to. Well, I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to be fearful that I might get sick because then I probably will get sick. And here's the thing. When I arrive, I'm always traveling to speak. That's basically it. That's why I travel. I travel to do interviews on other podcasts or TV shows or videos or whatever it might be, or I'm giving a talk at a seminar. And when I do that, I have to make sure that I keep my voice. And I have to make sure that my body is strong and that I don't look totally run down because nobody wants to see me if I look totally run down, right? So that's what you have to do, right? You need to stay ahead of the curve. But it's also, I won't be doing super hard workouts the 2 or 3 days before I travel because then I know that I'm going to be waking up early for a flight as well, probably an hour earlier. And then I go through the whole hassle of going through airport security and trying to get on time for my flight and dealing with traffic. So again, ebbs and flows and exercise. That's why it's always good to have this periodization model in there. Okay, so watch if you're getting too many colds per year. It's normal for everyone to get sick a couple times a year. That is absolutely normal. It does not mean that you're not healthy. It simply means that you got sick. Now your immune system's going to respond to it. You should get well within 5 days. And if you don't, well, then that could be a sign that your immune system's a little weakened. But look at that, okay? Really, really important. All right, let's move on now to more of the mind. There's a big thing. A lot of people, when they're overtraining, they're getting a little bit too catabolic from their training, is they start to get a loss of concentration and focus. So they have a little bit more brain fog. They're a little cloudier. They're a little slower getting started. And I see this quite often. If that's starting to happen to you or it has happened to you, don't ramp up your output. Work on your recovery. All right? Super important. Another one is this, a change in personality. It doesn't mean that you're, what is it called? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? What it means is this, is that you start to see a trend towards you being a little bit more irritable or you being a little bit more anxious. If you're not typically an anxious person or you're not typically an irritable person, what's going on? Lack of sleep? Too much exercise? You're just basically, you're not recovering, right? That's what catabolic means. You're not recovering well enough. What do we need to do? I'll talk about that on a future show coming up soon, all right? But I also see this, especially in men, I would say, but it can happen in men and women. I see this overbearing aggressive attitude. It's almost like they're not like men and women, they're not able to deal with the current level of stress being added to with an over-aggressive exercise program, and they just start to become very irritable. Now, it could be from elevated levels of testosterone, maybe, but it can also be that they don't know how to deal with this becoming run down and just not being able to keep up, so they get irritable. That's more my personality, meaning that it's almost like inside my mind, I built it up to a place where I refuse to not be able to live the life that I want. So when I overdo, I don't really start to get low or apathetic, which can happen for some people. So please do look for that as well. Apathy is you just don't care. You just don't care one way or another. You don't care if you have the great relationship or great body or great spirituality, relationship, etc. It's like you just don't care. Well, that's apathy. That's actually worse. That's a lower state of vibrational being. Being too aggressive, though, which I would probably more compensate towards, is that you've just taken on too much and you've overflowed that rain barrel and instead you just get irritable with everyone. And my team certainly knows that. Sometimes I'm like, I get a little bit too much fire, a little bit too much pitta. And I talk to them and I just say, usually I'm like, all right, I need to reel back. I know it's, I have the right intentions, but I've just gone about it wrong. I just really have. I've gone about it wrong. So look for that. All right. Super important. The other side of that spectrum is depression. If you've been going too hard for too long and you just keep pushing through it because you have that pitta mindset, eventually you will break and you will become depressed. It happens with a lot of people. I was there myself. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but simply depression is a real thing. And I don't like our society that over-medicates everyone because in the long term, it's not the right thing to do. I do understand there's a time and a place for medication. I understand that and I support it, right? I absolutely support it. If you are in a place, it's a breaking place, you're feeling suicidal, there are thoughts that you can't control, well, then you might need medication for temporary period of time so that you work through it with a de-stress protocol, with a qualified practitioner, and you work through it with a therapist maybe as well. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But look at it as temporary, not the fix, because it's not the fix. And we see that 18 months later after being on antidepressants, most people are no better, right? Because you're burning out those serotonin pathways, right? You're shutting off your selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? The SSRIs is what they predominantly are. Let's be careful with that for the long run. But let's also look at how did we get here? Did we just push for too long and now we're basically wiped out, right? If the body is tired, the mind can be tired as well, and we look at that also as depression. Important to look at that. All right. Another one that leads into that, fatigue, believe it or not, can lead to insomnia. I know it sounds strange. You should be able to sleep at night, right? But it's not always the case. You actually need energy. You need energy in the body to shift from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system at night. And if you can't make that shift, you do not allow the body to turn off the engine. Can't turn off the engine, it's revving, and that will not allow you to sleep. And I know that from personal experience. And I overcame this by being able to turn off that engine, turn off the sympathetic nervous system, turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest and rejuvenate. Where the sympathetic nervous system is the go, 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 fight or flight, and it's needed during the day, okay? But it's the catabolism, whereas the anabolism is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is why I highly recommend everybody stay in that from 7 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. in the morning, or 6 p.m. at night to 6 in the morning when you wake up, or even maybe ideally 6 o'clock at night to 8 a.m. in the morning. Get more of that anabolism, more of the rejuvenation, right? And dip into it during the day. Go for your 20-minute walk at lunch. Get into nature. I'll be talking about that a little bit more on tomorrow's show as well. So let's be careful with also understanding that we need to make sure that we're getting the rejuvenating sleep at night and that we're actually falling asleep. Check out the deep sleep protocol that we talk about. Check out the ultimate deep sleep protocol for those people that really have deep insomnia-based issues. Check that out, all right? I'll let you do that on your own. I want to get into just two more, and these two more are very, very important. These are actually getting into now medical-based conditions. The first one is this, very, very important. And you can simply check this with a oximeter on your finger, OXIMETER. Just go to stephencabral.com/podcast, type in oximeter. You'll hear a little bit more about it. It's something that you can get anywhere. You'll probably have it at like your local drugstore. You can get it certainly online. And I just give links to the ones that I like. They're not mine in particular, but I know that they work. And you can check your resting heart rate, especially upon waking. Your resting heart rate upon waking should be between 50 and around 65 beats per minute. If you're waking up with an elevated heart rate in the 70s or above, it means your body is not getting the rejuvenation that it needs and you're more stuck in that sympathetic nervous system. We need to work on that. This is very, very important, okay? And then during the day, it doesn't mean just because you're moving. If you're at your desk, you should still be in the 60s, right? 50 or 60s for your beats per minute. If you're walking around, okay, then it can be a little bit more elevated, 70s, 80s. But if you're already in the 80s when you're seated, and then when you're walking around, you're in the 90s or 100, think about the stress that is putting on your body. Your body's beating, your heart's beating more times per minute. It's more stress in the body. Save that for your exercise, not your parasympathetic nervous system activities. It's under $20, I think, for one of those oximeters. I mean, it's an important tool. It's a tool that you're using for your health that all you need to do is replace the battery maybe once a year. That's it. It's worth it. And it will check your oxygen levels. Oxygen levels should be a 98 or above. Okay, check that out as well. Now, the last one is this, and this is where we start to get even deeper into the wellness and the health. Check your blood sugar. Your blood sugar upon waking, I've talked about this before, so you can simply, again, go to stephencabral.com/podcast. All of the shows are there. Today is episode 1287. stephencabral.com/1287 is today's shows. Why don't I do this? I'll make it easy for you. I'll link up the oximeter, and I will link up a glucometer to check your blood sugar in the morning. And if my team can remember anything else that I said, we'll link that up as well today. I'll make it easy for you. That's it. So stephencabral.com/1287. You want to check your blood sugar upon waking. If you check it no other time of day, that is the time to check it. Make sure it is between about 75 and 90. That's all you want to see on your glucometer. 75 to 90 should show up. It can go down to 70. That's okay. But I find a lot of people who get to 70 and below are really at the verge of dipping too much into having to produce cortisol that early in the morning. That will then raise their own blood sugar to get them back in a normal range. But it depends on also how you feel. Like some people can feel great around 70. So, let's make it easy. Between 70 and 90 is what you want to show up on your glucometer. And that will let you know if you're being able to tap into body fat during the night, which is obviously important. You want to use that as a slow fuel overnight. And also if you are not spiking those stress hormones that early in the morning. So check that out. That will let you know too if you're more of that catabolic state or potentially moving more towards type 2 diabetes that we certainly want to keep a watch on. So those are the signs. Are you overtraining? Are you pushing the body too hard? And I think this episode builds off of last week's 1279. So hopefully you go back and you check out that as well. I'll link everything up today at stephencabral.com/1287. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. As always, if this was helpful, please do feel free to pass this episode along to anyone you believe it could serve. Have an amazing rest of the day. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only two ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.